Hello again. I want to talk to you this time about something that's a common part of being human. And we're all aware of it, but nobody really talks about it or gives it much thought. And that is the idea of leaders versus followers. And we're all aware of the fact that in the human species, like with a whole lot of other animal species, we tend to be a whole lot of followers and a very tiny number of leaders. That's just the way it works. And the reason it works is because we are contented to be followers. We don't have aspirations of becoming the leader. 99.99% of us are going to be followers, and that's what we're happy doing. And we're comfortable as long as we have somebody we trust and we have faith in to lead the way. And like I say, it works that way not just with human beings, but with all kinds of animals. Take, for example, ants that you see out there in the yard following the ant trail. What happens, of course, is all these millions of little ants that follow the same trail indefinitely, forever. But if you disrupt the trail, somehow or other, you put a barrier across it, what happened? It confuses the ants. The ants go all willy-nilly and they're confused for a while, but eventually, you watch it sometime. What happens is eventually one ant will figure out a workaround. That ant somehow or other pondered the complexities of the situation here and figured out how to get around that barrier. And as soon as that one ant figured that out, here come all the rest of the ants following right along behind that leader. So you have all these thousands and thousands of followers behind one leader. And the same thing happens in a lot of species. It's like if you watch the geese in formation overhead. They're in the V formation. There's one at the peak of the V out there, at the apex out there, and that's the leader, who presumably is the one who knows where he's going. Why do the others follow the leader? It's called faith. Faith is the attribute of the follower. And we human beings are no different. And that's why we're biologically set up to be 99.999% followers and only 0.0001% leaders. And that's why the most stable kind of society would be like a feudal society, where you have an authoritarian living in a castle up there, whether it's the king or the duke or the baron, whatever he is, lives in the castle, the landowner. And then down below at the foot of the hill, in the peasant villages, you have all the peasants. And they're happy being peasants. It's only been in our society in the last couple of hundred years with representative democracy and so on, that the ordinary folks have become disenchanted with remaining peasants. Typically, throughout human history, the peasants have been okay with remaining peasants. They live their own life. They have their own society down there in the peasant village. They don't, by and large, have aspirations or dreams of moving into the castle. Cinderella's a fairy tale. Sure, your Cinderellas throughout history might have had fantasies of marrying the handsome prince, but they didn't really think it was ever going to happen, because in real life, it didn't happen that way. That was only a fantasy. That was only a dream. In real life, the peasants live in the peasant village. The prince lives in the castle. And for every prince, there's 100,000 peasants, the followers. So that's what it always has been, and that's the way human society works. We are a whole bunch of followers who fall in line behind one leader. And the reason we follow in line behind one leader is because we have trust in that leader, or faith. Faith is the attribute of the followers. Now, what's the attribute of the leader?
Ponderance. The leader is the one who ponders. The followers rarely do. The followers, by their very nature, don't tend to be deep thinkers, or they would be leaders. The followers are more comfortable having faith that a leader knows what he's doing. So they have faith in that leader, they follow along behind him and do what he says. And that's what faith is. Faith is having blind, unwavering trust that the leader will not lead them astray, that the leader knows what he's talking about, knows where he's going, and will lead them safely to the end of the trail. So it's important to remember that fact about human nature, that we are 99.99% followers, and nature intended it to be that way. So when people speak of having faith in their religion, that's who's comfortable having faith, are followers. Christians, they follow what? They follow the Bible. They follow the New Testament. They follow the words of the gospel writers and the prophets and of Jesus. And they have faith that those prophets and that Jesus and that the Bible are truthful and would not lead them astray. They believe wholeheartedly that they're safe in following the Bible. And thus they have faith in it. Occasionally along comes a ponderer. Jesus was one of those. Now, he may have been a lot of other things. You can argue all day long what Jesus was, whether he was the Son of God, whether he was God come to earth, or if he was a spirit, or whatever you want. The Messiah, he might have been the Jewish Messiah. He might have been all of those things or any of those things. But the one thing he was a man who pondered. He was a ponderer. He, no matter where he got his ideas, whether it came from God or it came from many years of intellectual and spiritual studies, we don't know where he got his ideas, but all of a sudden he emerged one day at the age of about 30 with ideas. And those ideas, you have to figure, came from his pondering along the way. They were ideas that just happened to be the right ideas for the time and place, and therefore people were ready for that idea and that message. And guess what? That ponderer named Jesus became the leader of a whole lot of followers who had faith in him. So that's the way it works. And that's the way we should accept that it works. We should be like the peasants in the peasant village. We need to be perfectly content and happy with that arrangement. Accept the fact that you and I are the followers, and we have faith and follow the exceptional person, the ponderer, who becomes the leader, because that ponderer has ideas and we think, we have faith that that ponderer has some sort of a link to the real truth. That the ponderer, the leader, knows things that we don't and we can never know. We just trust that that's the case. And there have been other pondering leaders throughout history, besides Jesus, of course. You could argue all day long. You could say that Muhammad was one, maybe, that Joseph Smith might have been one, that Moses was one, that Buddha was one, or Confucius. There have been a lot of ponderers who were above and beyond, they were on a different level than us ordinary followers. So those people did not rely on faith. They relied on something else that we don't know what it was, but it comes back to pondering, but it might have been something divine. We don't know.
And we also see that same phenomenon happening in government. It's not a coincidence that by far the majority of governments and societies that have existed throughout human history have been authoritarian in nature. It's extremely rare and it's an extremely new phenomenon, this whole idea of self-rule or democracy. That hasn't been around very long. And in fact, the United States of America is really the first experiment with representative democracy since the Greeks and the Romans played around with a little bit centuries ago. But throughout human history, nearly every government on the planet has been a situation where you had many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of followers who are perfectly content and happy having faith in a leader. Whether it's a king or a dictator or whatever he is. We as fans of democracy tend to look askance at that idea, but it's really not a bad idea. It's the idea that works in most societies. The only time that democracy is ever going to work, self-rule, is if the majority of the people themselves, if not ponderers, they're at least educated and knowledgeable of facts. You can't have a functional democracy with an ignorant populace. So the people have to be at a certain level of education and knowledge in order to rule themselves. And that's why in most countries around the world and throughout history, you don't have that. Because it just works that way. It's just the fact that the majority of human beings on the planet have never been people with a whole lot of knowledge and have not been deep thinkers. So in most situations, most countries, even today and throughout history, what works the best, what people are most happy with, is being a follower of an authoritarian leader. They have faith that that leader knows what he's doing and would not lead them astray. So much as we hate the idea of dictatorships and kings, they're actually a pretty stable kind of government. As long as the people are happy with it. That's the important thing. As long as the populace, the masses, are content with their leader and have faith that he or she knows what they're doing, everything works fine. Because they'll follow right along, right? Because they're the followers, and faith is the attribute of the follower. Ponderance is the attribute of the leader. And for every one leader, there are hundreds, thousands, if not millions of followers. And so it is with the human species.